This video is brought to you by my patrons on Patreon. Thank you so much for your generous support in funding this channel and keeping it up and running. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavony Township, the show where it's not about me and my decks, it is about you and your decks. Whether you're a content creator that I'm collaborating with, whether you're a patron of mine at patreon.com/magicalhacker, or whether you're someone that's won one of my Twitter or Facebook giveaways. For today's episode, we've got a pretty cool one. Unspokenblood has submitted his Jodah Archmage Eternal deck, and you'll notice here, it only says 97 cards. I actually will go into that really quick. So there's two cards in here that are in the deck list, but not on Magic Online. The first one here is Reality Twist. You'll notice when I search up Reality, that comes up with a bunch of different cards, including ones I don't have. When I go for Reality Twist, that's not available online. The other one that's not here is a 9-drop. It was, let me see, I think it was, if we search up Cruel, we'll see that Cruel comes up with a bunch of things. But if we search up Cruel Entertainment, that will not come up at all. So those two are in the list as well. And so what I'll do to kind of represent both of those is let me look up something with Cruel and I'll look up something with Reality, and that way we can kind of keep track of those. What's a good one here for Cruel? You know what, let's do this one. Let's do the Hythonia as the replacement for Cruel. This is not going to be obviously in the deck, but I'm using this to represent Cruel Entertainment, so it's going to have to do. And then the other one that I think is going to be a good, just kind of keeping track of what it looks like. Yeah, let's go for this one. This is Reality Spasm. Obviously not going to be in this deck, but it's going to be a good replacement for Reality Shift. Reality Shift is kind of like Naked Singularity, and then Cruel Entertainment is kind of like Mindslaver. And I actually can go in and take a look at what those look like in a second here. So let me show you. I'm going to open up a new tab, and we're going to go to Scryfall here. I'll show you exactly what those two cards do. So that way you can kind of keep tracking, kind of come along with this deck doctor as we're doing this for Unspoken Blood, which is one of my patrons. So yeah, I'm going to go look up Reality Twist, and the other one is going to be Cruel Entertainment. And you'll notice both of these cards are not available online, so can't really do the deck doctor looking at it that way, but these are those two cards. If you wanted to, pause the video, read them, take a look at what they do, this is what they are doing, so we can kind of keep track of that throughout the deck list. All right, so let's go back to our list here. So the way I usually do a deck doctor, which is what Unspoken Blood has submitted this deck for. The way I usually do a deck doctor is I figure out, okay, what is the deck trying to do in order to win? And then taking that win, how do I make it a little bit more streamlined in that direction? And, sometimes I might cut a card that I personally don't like. Most of the time I don't. I leave those cards in there. If they're doing a specific category, I consider them, good enough for that category. But this deck is a little bit different. So this is a Chaos deck. And Chaos decks are one of the few decks in which the strategy is actually different than what every other strategy will be doing. So regardless of what your deck type is, your strategy is going to be, okay, I'm going to be playing a lot of tokens so I can win the game. I'm going to be making opponents mill so I can win the game. I'm going to be doing this so I can win the game. Everything is, every other deck is, I will be doing XYZ so I can win the game. That is the point of the deck. That's the goal, ultimately. You're not going to be building a deck to just not win, like, hey, this is my deck, I want to lose with it. Nobody builds a deck that way. However, there are some decks which have a goal higher than winning. Chaos is one of them. Group Hug is another one. Kingmaker might be a third version of that. But yeah, Chaos is one of those versions of a deck where you're not trying to win. You're not trying to take this theme or archetype or strategy of making things chaotic and bringing it to a win outside of maybe trying to frustrate your opponents to the point where they concede because they don't want to play anymore. That might be the only way you can see a chaotic deck trying to win. So when it comes to normal deck doctors, I'm kind of flipped up on my head because I can't really take that normal desire to try to make the deck more streamlined and make it win more often. Can't really do that with a Chaos deck. So instead what I'm doing is, what can I do to make this deck even more chaotic? What's the best way to do that? And I think a lot of that will have to do with certain aspects of the deck build where we can kind of either help us get more chaotic effects on the battlefield or upgrade some of the effects that we have in this deck to become more chaotic. Now, one thing I do want to point out here is there's only 26 lands in the deck. Even if we included the Soul Ring here, that's still just 27 cards in the mana base. Personally, I think you really don't want to go below 35. So at some point we will be adding in 8 lands just to make the mana base a little bit easier to use. Because you don't want to get stuck on mana, especially if you're playing cumulative upkeep cards, which we might not even keep these cards, this one and the Reality Twist, which obviously this is not that card, but keeping those 2 cumulative upkeep cards, we might keep them, we might not. It just really depends on how things work out for us. So it's going to be kind of up in the air. So why don't we do this? Let's go and start moving things into different categories so we can keep track of them. So we've got here, let me go ahead and I'll move a bunch of these into similar stacks. So what we can do here is, select all this, put this into a big stack. We'll select all this, put this into that stack. All right, pretty cool. And let's cut these in half because this is, I think, too much here. Yeah, that looks pretty good, right? We got a couple of these cards here. Yeah, that's fine. We're kind of mixing things up, which definitely in the spirit of chaos. All right, so let's start off with this. So we've got Polymorph. Polymorph is a random effect. However, this deck is about chaos, not about randomness. So let me explain to you, in my opinion, what's the difference. So a random deck is like Occam and, what's the other one of those? Zndrsplt, I think? Zndrsplt and Occam. So those two are commanders that are partnered together that allow you to use a coin flip deck. That's definitely a random deck, but it's not a chaotic deck. Here's the difference. Randomness says, me as your opponent, I don't know if what you're doing is going to be too scary or not. It's hard for me to tell. Because of that randomness effect, I don't know if you're going to win the lottery or if you're going to lose the lottery. And because of that, it's hard for me to evaluate whether or not I should be afraid of you. That's one aspect. That's the random strategy, which is good. It's not bad. It's certainly fun, but it's not chaos. It's not chaos to the point where, your opponents are just amazed at the deck. That type of chaos is a little bit different. That's where you say, not only are you doing random stuff, but now you're causing me to have random stuff and for me to, commonly forget so many things that are happening on the board because the board has just become super complicated and super complex. That's what I think of when I think of chaos, is making the board more complex, making people's strategies go from pretty, well-tuned into kind of randomized. So that's something else that we need to keep in mind. So with that in mind, there's a lot of things that we can do here. And I think Polymorph definitely falls into the aspect of you are doing something random. You're not making me do anything random. And sure, you can use a Polymorph and target somebody else's creature, but usually that's not going to be that helpful. So because you're using up a card, you're using up 4 mana, and then you might not impact the board that much. So this is I'm going to put in the remove pile for right now. Next card here is Order of Succession. This is a way that you can allow opponents to gain control of things. So yeah, this is certainly pretty chaotic. I kind of like this one. I do want to try to avoid having instants and sorceries in the deck, just because if you're using up cards from your hand and they have a one-time effect, you're really not adding complexity to the board. You're adding it temporarily to the stack, but overall you do want to increase the amount of complexity on the board. That makes your chaotic effects even more powerful. So I'm going to put this in a maybe pile because it is an instant or sorcery. So Lost Oromancers, this is kind of like a version of Academy Rector. It's not that great. I know it's great, you can use for tutoring. So we'll put that into a tutoring spot, but that's something that could, technically could go away. Conjured Currency, this one is a great example of a chaos effect. You're making opponents not be able to keep their things. They have to get other people's things. They can't even get their own things back using this card, so that makes it pretty helpful. Hive Mind's also pretty chaotic. Now, people might not want to use the instants and sorceries in their hand. It makes it more complicated. Cultural Exchange. So this is another type of... Actually, no, this is more like an exchange effect, but this is a sorcery. So you can exchange, you can make people exchange creatures, but again, sorcery effects, we're going to try to limit those down. Not only because we've got Hive Mind in the deck where we don't want, well, I guess in a way, if we've got Hive Mind, we can use our instants and sorceries a couple of more times. I don't know, it feels very much like you want to have more instants, you want to have more permanents rather than instants and sorceries. So there are certain examples like Choice of Damnations. I feel like this was pretty cool. It is a little bit limited in that you can't really choose multiple opponents. So we'll do this. We'll just keep, stacking things. We'll put all the instants and sorceries into one pile, and then we'll come back to that later on. This one obviously cares about instants and sorceries, so that one we'll put into another pile. That's kind of in a similar boat. This one's just good value. Solemnity. This one, can really hurt opponents' strategies. There might be some, interactions with cards in the deck like this Naked Singularity. So that's, obviously pretty good. If we're going to be able to use that, that's going to be pretty awesome for us. This one is interesting. Unfortunately, if an opponent really gets tired of it, Stark of Wrath can destroy itself, which makes it pretty lame in a lot of situations. So I'm going to put this in the remove pile. We've moved all the instances and sorceries into a single pile, but I do want to put the polymorph back there. And even this Choice of Damnations, I'm fine with that moving into that pile too. Alright, so we've got Ramp. Like I said, sometimes I will remove cards if I don't like it, but a lot of times I leave them in there because, hey, if an opponent likes it that much, then, if one of my Patreons likes it that much, then I'm going to let them keep it. So there's that Ramp pile. Next one's going to be Joiner Adept. So this one is another card that I think we can remove. Having the ability to use all of our lands for specific colors is nice, but the fact that it's all that it doesn't really help us all that much. So, Chromatic Lantern's not bad. We can always go for more color fixing as well, and that should get rid of that problem. Whereas this Joiner Adept is really, fixing one of our problems without doing anything else. And so that's kind of, it's just a little bit lame for me personally. Not that I think that was a lame inclusion, it's just that I think that's probably easy to remove. Redirect, this one's interesting. It's kind of a response. Not too bad, but I think it's going to be a little bit better in this deck being replaced for a Chaos effect. Planeswalker's Mischief, this one's another type of effect that's random, but it doesn't make it chaotic. So that's why I feel like that's fine dropping that one. Another instant here. It is about bidding, which is kind of cool. I know a lot of people really like that, but personally I don't think that's super helpful here. Indomitable Creativity, again, you're basically having a random effect yourself. You're not forcing opponents to turn their spells into something that's random. So this is kind of changing things up as well. If you're ever looking at a card and asking yourself, would this card be more powerful if it were a board wipe? If you ever say yes, that's probably a sign that it's not great for the deck itself. Indomitable Creativity could very easily be Curse of the Swine. Curse of the Swine would be more powerful. It shuts off those creatures that you were targeting anyways. It just doesn't give your opponents those creatures or artifacts from their deck as a replacement. So that's certainly probably worse to give them those types of effects. Whims of the Fate, I kind of like this one. It slows the game down, so it does make it more complex. The problem is, though, it makes you get rid of your own chaotic effects as well. So that's why a lot of times, it might seem like, oh, this would be great for a chaotic deck. But really, it doesn't really work out the way you want because it slows you down as well. So that's why, I don't know, this is a tough one. I kind of like this one. Why don't we do this? We'll keep this in here just for now. If we need to drop it later on, we can. Grip of Chaos, this is a classic chaotic effect. I love it. Knowledge Pool, another classic. That's pretty good. So Naked Singularity and Reality Twist, both of these seem like they'd be great. If you're playing 5 colors, you might as well play these and you make opponents not be able to use their mana the way they want. However, think about it this way. If you've got a Naked Singularity, some opponents will be able to tap for mana like they need to, and some won't, right? Some will and some won't. That's just the way it works. But the problem is, the ones it affects the most are the monocolor decks. So personally, I don't like punching down in that way. People don't think of monocolor decks as being as powerful, or at least as fun as multicolor decks, so they're not as popular. So I feel as though, playing a Naked Singularity, you're going to be really affecting the monocolor players more than anybody else. And that doesn't really make it that much fun for me, especially kind of in the same way they were talking about the Indomitable Creativity. If your opponents see this, they don't like this, just like they wouldn't like seeing Land Destruction. Land Destruction would certainly be a lot more powerful if you're trying to prevent people from casting things or using their activated abilities or what have you. So Naked Singularity, kind of like a worse version of a Mass Land Destruction spell, still gets a lot of people, pretty angry at you. So that's why I feel like this one, totally reasonable to drop that one. In my Chaos deck, I did have, and this was a long time ago, I used to have a Chaos deck back in the day. I used to have some things that would slow down opponents' ability to respond to the board, because I found that when you're doing a lot of chaotic effects, opponents just say, I can't control my game plan until I get rid of these permanents. So there might be a scarier permanent on the battlefield, but at least I can respond to it afterwards. So I've got to try to get rid of the things that's preventing me from responding. So I ended up playing a lot of things that would prevent lands from untapping or destroy lands. Yeah, it was not a very fun deck for my opponents. So that's why I didn't play it anymore. But with Naked Singularity, I think this kind of falls into the same game plan. You want to slow down your opponents, and there's a couple of ways you can do that. And I'll talk about that in a second here. That you can do that without actually going to the realm of stacks or mass land destruction. Child of Lara, this is a good board wipe, so we do want to set up a position for board wipe. If we're going to be dropping the cumulative upkeep cards, I think it's reasonable also to drop the Solemnity cards. So we can move that over, and this is going to be perfect. We have now a spot for board wipes. Fractured Identity, this one's interesting. It allows you to give multiple opponents a copy of the permanent that you own. So in a way, this is another effect that's chaotic. Like, for example, let's say we happen to choose a knowledge pool with the Fractured Identity. Now it's going to do something really strange, and it's going to get chaotic, and it's going to go all over the place. So that's kind of cool. Same thing with Hive Mind. I mean, you can really do a lot of cool stuff with this. So this combines really well with all of our other chaotic effects. Whereas Radiate, although it works really cool with Fractured Identity, it doesn't do a whole lot in a deck if we're trying to use a lot of instants and sorceries, if we're trying to use a lot of permanents, and I think that's what we're going to want to do. So compared to everything else, like we can use the Radiate targeting our Polymorph, and now we get to Polymorph all creatures. But again, it's not going to be that great. We can use Radiate on Choice of Damnations, but again, it's not going to be that chaotic. It's going to be a temporary thing, and then it's going to be gone. So Radiate, I feel like it's pretty easy to drop. Now, Possibility Storm, this is another classic chaotic effect. I really enjoy it. Same thing with Confusion in the ranks. Kind of like another version of Conjured Currency. Now, Witch Hunt is interesting. It moves at random. It makes players not gain life, which is not the important part, but it deals 4 damage, randomly to players, which is kind of cool. The fact that it moves around randomly kind of means that you won't be able to know if it's going to be targeting you over and over and over. But even then, each upkeep losing 4 life, there are plenty of cards that are significantly worse than that. So while this is a random effect, I don't know if it's a very chaotic effect. That's the difference. Head games, target opponent puts the cards from their hand on top of their library, search that player's library for that many cards. The player puts those cards into their hand, then shuffles their library. Not bad, but at the same time, you're really just making one person lose their hand. There's certainly cards that you can use if you want to make everybody lose their hand, like Awaken the Erstwhile, and cards like that. But, I don't think that's going to be super helpful in a deck like this. So this is the Cruel Entertainment that we were using. This is kind of our replacement for right now, so we can talk about it. That's the one that basically you choose 2 players, and they each Mind Slaver each other during their next turn. Now, Mind Slaver effects are cool, but the problem with them is that you really aren't guaranteed to have those 2 opponents trying to hurt each other. They could be using each other's board state to try to hurt you, and you really kind of lose that effect. You could also choose yourself, but maybe opponent getting control of your turn makes things a lot worse. So there's definitely a lot of things to keep in mind here. Cruel Entertainment, I kind of like it in that it complicates the board. So I'm going to say let's keep it in there. Personally, I think it's okay. Now with the Reality Twist, this one I feel like is also droppable, just like the Naked Singularity. Scrambleverse, these are a couple of instants and sorceries that I can think of that are actually pretty good as ways to randomize the board state and make things very different. I like Scrambleverse. I also like Thieves' Auction. Both of these cards are pretty cool, actually, in my opinion. Next, we've got Dismiss into Dream. Now, this one's kind of interesting, where you're using it as a way to shut off people from targeting their own creatures, and on top of that, you have a way to target their creatures and get them off the battlefield as well. I don't know how useful this is in a deck like this. It certainly does change things up, and opponents will forget about it, so I kind of feel like because of that, it is kind of cool that we can use that in a way. I don't know. I feel like we'll keep it in there for now, and we'll see if we need to change it. Now, Eye of the Storm is another classic chaotic effect. I really enjoy that effect myself. This one's a great way of getting value out of opponents. Ghastly Conscription. This is another sorcery. I don't know how I feel about this one in that we're getting manifested cards out of a graveyard, but, like, if you really want to get creatures out of a graveyard, why not go for like Rise of the Dark Realm or something like that? I just don't see this as super helpful. Goblin Game, it's pretty simple how you play this. You choose like 4 or 5, and then that way you're pretty, you're probably not going to lose, and so you're probably going to be okay. One person losing half their life total is pretty chaotic, but at the same time, it's really not that big of an impactful board. It's not really going to change the way the game's playing compared to all of these chaotic effects. And you might be wondering, okay, well, what happens if we don't have any of those, if we can't find any more chaotic effects to add into the deck? What if we run out? Now, that might be the case. I don't think so, but even if that were the case, we can just simply add some of these back in, depending on which one is, more impactful to the board and which ones are less. Another board wipe here, which is pretty cool. Now, this does require us to play instants and sorceries in the deck, so with that in mind, we might not be able to actually use that. We'll see when we get to it. Thieves Auction, that's another one. I thought I already added that one in. It looks like I added in Warp World, which is another great one. Yeah, those are certainly different cards. Warp World, Thieves Auction, both pretty nice. I like them because they can really change the way the board state looks. There's another card that's also similar to Warp World, which is the Great Aurora. We'll see as we go through cards. We'll find some more things like that. Now, Teriel here, this is a random effect. Don't get me wrong, random effects are certainly a part of what might you think of Chaos, but it's not going to be impactful that much to your opponents. Your opponents aren't going to be looking at this and playing differently as a result. Same thing with Beacon of Immortality. Doubling somebody's life total doesn't really change things that much. Now, you might be wanting to use this on yourself to make yourself survive a little bit longer, but I think what's going to be more impactful, since we're not playing a lot of creatures so far in this deck, probably just adding a bunch of ways to destroy creatures, and that way you can stay alive for longer and not have to worry about doubling your life total or anything like that. Now, Axis of Mortality, this one's cool. I like this effect a lot. I wish I had a place to use Axis of Mortality personally, but the downside here is that you're really not doing a whole lot besides making opponents, looking at their life total a little bit differently. And you know what? That actually might be enough. Somebody saying, I don't want to kill that one person, or I don't want to reduce their life total super low, because if I don't kill them, then Axis of Mortality can change my life total as a result. So this one's actually kind of cool. Not something I would think of for Chaos, but it does certainly impact the board and make things a little bit weird and different. So let's go ahead and make 2 piles here as we keep going along. So we've got some more ramp here. We'll include this in ramp. We'll include that in ramp. This one is kind of like card draw, so yeah, we'll consider that card draw. Why not? We'll put that as card draw here. We'll move this all into the stack so we can make a stack of card draw. Alright, so this one, Statecraft. Prevent all common damage to be dealt to and dealt by creatures you control. This one allows you to block with lots of creatures, but at the same time, I don't know how impactful that is because, we're not playing that many creatures as it is at the moment, so probably not that great. Probably not that great in a deck like this. What else we have next? Caribou Range. So this one is kind of interesting because you can, make tokens and you can sacrifice them for life, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like a great fit for a deck like this. I feel like we can do a lot more chaotic things, and I think that would be great for us to do. Alright, so let's see here. Raving Dead. You choose an opponent at random. It's got Death Touch, so we can make opponents lose half their life total randomly. But again, it's not really changing how they're going to be playing out their game, so it's fine to drop. So far, we actually have been dropping quite a number of cards, 20 cards here. Again, Unspokenblood, this is based on what I would think of that would be best for a chaotic deck. So, take what you want, leave out what you don't like. This is just how I'm seeing it so far. I feel like this is probably the way to think about this. Telement Performance, again, another random effect, but not necessarily another chaotic effect. Psychic Battle, this one I like because you can actually, opponents' games will actually change as a result of that. Same thing with Shared Fate. I really like a card like that. And also Perplexing Chimera. Oh man, this is another great one. Curse of Echoes, that is fantastic. Chaos Warp, this is good spot removal. We'll make a spot removal, section here. We got the Chromatic Lantern for ramp, Darksteel Ingot, Mind Stone. We've got Enlightened Tutor, which is another tutor, which is not bad. I think tutors are going to be pretty helpful. Chain of Vapor, this is spot removal. A little bit of the random side of it, but that's fine. It's spot removal, it's spot removal. This one's a way for them to gain life and shuffle their graveyard. I know a lot of people like Elixir of Immortality. Personally, I just don't think it's worth a card slot. You rarely, go up against a mill deck. Like, almost never. And even when you do, a lot of times, if you've got recursion, you can use that recursion to beat them, as they're milling you. And so that just seems like Elixir of Immortality just usually is better replaced for recursion if you really need it. Now, Intervention Pact, we've got a lot of packs in here, and that's probably because of the Hive Mind. So with Hive Mind and the Intervention Packs, this will allow you to kill opponents. But again, kind of similarly to the Naked Singularity, this works best against monocolored opponents. And individually, the pacts are not all that impactful. Ironically, obviously a counterspell is not bad, and spot removal is not bad. But ultimately, these are not going to be as powerful as what you'd like. So I'm fine dropping even all 4 of them. Yes, technically, this Slaughter Pact is spot removal. And you know what? Let's actually keep that one in. Because that one, I feel bad, dropping that one too. The rest of them, though, I feel like these definitely can be dropped. And I don't think it's going to be that much of a deal. Now, Teferi's Puzzle Box. This one certainly changes up game plans from your opponents. Because now they can't really plan out their future turns. That's going to be a huge part of this deck. What can we do to prevent opponents from planning out their future turns? That's what's going to be able to help us win the game. We've got Sands of Time here. This one, I've noticed, back when there was Mana Burn, it was a lot better. But now this is not that big of a deal because opponents just tap all their lands before their turn and they keep using their lands. It just gives, creatures double summoning sickness. But beyond that, it doesn't do that much. It just makes, I guess in a way it kind of makes the game take a little bit longer, but really doesn't change that much of the game in the end. Portcullis, this definitely changes how people plan out their turns. Tempted Discovery, this is a tutor. I don't know if there's any lands here we need to grab, but we'll go ahead and put that in the tutor section. Now, this one is spot removal. It is 4 mana, which is certainly not bad. But, destroying things at random, again, is not chaotic. It's a random effect. So that's why I feel okay dropping this one. Tackle Magna. This one's a tough one. Beginning of your upkeep of Enchanted Creature's controller, put a -0/-1 counter on that creature. When an Enchanted Creature dies, that creature's controller chooses a creature that Tackle Magnet could enchant. If the player does, return Tackle Magnet to the battlefield under your control attached to that creature. If they don't, return Tackle Magnet to the battlefield under your control. As a non-aura enchantment, it loses enchant creature and gains at the beginning of that player's upkeep. Tackle Magnet deals 1 damage to that player. All right, so what a long line of text here. So Tackle Magnet, eventually, if somebody does a board wipe, it's just going to turn in a way to make one person lose 1 life every turn. So that's not great if there's a board wipe. However, it also can be used into turning creatures to have -1 toughness, which is seems cool. But ultimately, it's not going to be that great because there are plenty of effects that are better than this for that type of effect. So you got Elvish Norn, you've got Knight of Soul's Betrayal. I feel like those are be interesting inclusions. Whereas I think Necrotic Plague, this one certainly makes things a little bit differently because it destroys creatures, or rather, it makes creatures be sacrificed regardless of what their toughness is. So I kind of like this one compared to the Tackle Magnet. Last card here for our perusing, I guess you could say. We've got Reigns of Power. This one kind of switches, temporarily at least, the control of creatures. So we're going to go and add this one here to this effect. So that brings this total up to 29. And you'll notice here, we really don't have much card draw in this deck. I mean, you could technically consider Sunbird's Invocation as card draw if you'd like to, but really not a whole lot of card draw. Even Ramp, we're a little bit lacking. So between Ramp, between card draw, between lands, we're not going to have a whole lot of effects that we can add in that will be chaotic, but I think adding those cards in will certainly help us do more with our chaos effects. So we've got 29 spots. That is certainly a lot more than I think I've ever had on a Deck Doctor episode, but that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. That is definitely a good thing. Not that this deck was built incorrectly, but that my suggestions can be a lot deeper than they normally are. I think I'd rather have 29 cards that I could change compared to like 4, because I feel like when I'm doing just 4, I really can't recommend a whole lot here. All right, so we're gonna go back here to Scryfall, and one thing I'll be interested in doing here is I want to take a look to see how many effects can change when an opponent casts a spell. So things that happen when opponents cast spells, this can certainly slow the game down and feel chaotic without necessarily being random. There are certain other things as well. So let me try this at the beginning of each. And this is going to be pretty cool because we can say each opponent, each player, each upkeep. It doesn't matter. We're just going to find at the beginning of each. So by doing this, we can certainly find a lot of really cool things. We find 261 cards here. So why don't we do this? We're going to search. We're going to do this by EDH Rec Rank. We should find a lot of the more common ones at the top, so I can go pretty quickly through those. Rites of Flourishing certainly helps opponents, but we don't want to speed them up. We actually want to slow them down, is the way that we're trying to do things here. Fairy's Puzzle Box, we do have that in the deck already. Besides that, I kind of like the Sire of Insanity. if you're making an opponent's discard their hand, they're really going to have a hard time dealing with the board state, and that should help us out pretty well. So I'm gonna open up Sire of Insanity in a new tab, and we might include that one. I'm not 100% sure on that one just yet, but we'll go ahead and open that in a new tab. Let's see what else we've got here. Rite of the Raging Storm is kind of cool. It makes opponents be able to have additional creatures that they can attack with. So, you have to keep track of that as well, in addition to all the other stuff that you've been tracking up to this point. Let's see what else we can find here. Now, Seeing Dragon Broodmother. This one triggers when opponents, or this triggers at the beginning of each upkeep. It kind of is an effect that does more, but at the same time, it really doesn't help all that much. Because it's just putting just making a token each upkeep. That's not a big deal. That's pretty simple. Not really changing anything. On the other hand, Fate Spinner really changes up the board because now opponents really have to use something different. Same thing with the Goblin Spymaster. Making opponents' creatures have to attack really changes things up. I kind of like the Havoc Festival. It does affect you last, so that is potentially okay. I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe that's just too... Maybe we're trying it too hard to make the game over. Instead, we should be trying to make it just weird. Now, I like Open Machine. Not only does it stop opponents from drawing cards, it also makes them, forces them to cast things when they don't actually want to cast them. So I kind of like that one for sure here. Let's keep going along here. So there's a lot of options that we can add. Right now, there's a couple that I like. A couple that I don't like, but yeah, there are a couple that I do like. This one's pretty interesting. It makes opponents need to cast cards from their hand. They can't just hold them in their hand. They have to get rid of them. So that's kind of cool. I like the Wild Evocation as well. This makes them kind of in the same realm as the Omen Machine. It forces them to use those cards from their hand. Let's see what else we can find here. Gate to the Ether. I also like this one. It kind of forces people to put stuff onto the battlefield when they actually wouldn't prefer to do that. Quicksilver Fountain, kind of similar to our Naked Singularity type effects. Again, not going to be great here, I think. Hall of Gemstone, this one's kind of cool. It makes it very difficult for opponents to cast multicolored spells. So this is punching up instead of punching down like we mentioned before. What else can we find here? So Oath of Druids, this certainly adds a randomness effect to the game. It can make opponents play a little bit differently, so I kind of like that. If we want to, have good creatures in our deck too, that's also pretty helpful on top of that. So that's kind of nice. Risky Move. Beginning of each player's upkeep, that player gains control of Risky Move. When you gain control of Risky Move from another player, choose a creature you control. Oh, okay, so this one forces you to get rid of creatures. I like that one. That one's pretty cool. Time Sifter also seems pretty nice. Being able to force creatures or players to get different turns in different orders seems really fun. Untaps a land he or she controls. This one seems like another stacks effect, but we're not interested in an effect like that. Let's see what else we can find here. Corona is cool, but this one actually there's an argument to be made for Corona to be the commander, and then you can play a couple of cards that work really well with Corona, like the Vows and whatnot. And so you've got Corona on the battlefield. You're making opponents attack each other more. And that's kind of cool, but maybe not the best. Let's keep going down here. I do like the Jodah Archmage Eternal. Having that in the command zone means that even if we have something that's really expensive, we can still cast it for a lot less. And that should make everything, flow a little bit more smoothly. Noetic Scales is kind of interesting. Now you're forcing opponents to keep cards in the hand. So this does slow them down as well. I kind of like those types of cards. So let's keep going down here. Let's see what else we can find. Form of the Dragon's kind of funny, but not super great. What else can we find? Defiler of Souls. So I'm sure there's cards here that I'm missing, but at the same time, when I'm looking through these cards, I'm looking for a specific type of effect. So let me see. During each player's upkeep, let me see if there's a better Oracle text for this one, actually. Let's take a look what we can find. Beginning of each player's upkeep, that player exiles a card at random from their hand. Yeah, I like this one. This one seems pretty good. So we'll go ahead and open that in a new tab as well. And this one, Dimensional Breach. This is another effect similar to the Great Aurora, and I think that's going to be pretty nice in a deck like this. Let's keep going down. I know I've already pulled out a lot of cards here, so we actually might have too many at this point. Let's keep going down. Let's go to the next page, see what we can find. A lot of these cards here, do certain things. I'm just looking for the ones that I think are going to be the most chaotic and going to be the most impactful for them. I'm going to get rid of that Oath of the Druids, though, because that's also kind of speeding up opponents' game plans. Let me see what else I can find here that kind of speed up opponents' game plans as well. I guess Omen Machine kind of counts. Yeah, let's get rid of that one too. Let's get rid of that one. This one I like. This one I like as well because they're already going to be casting those spells as it is. This one is a difference because they're getting it from the top of their deck. This one I like. This one I like. And obviously this one, probably one of the best ones, I think. Time Twister is like the first card I think of when I think of a chaotic-based deck. Alright, so there's a couple of options there. There's not really a wrong way to build a chaos deck. There's not, like, when it comes to chaos effects, you can't really say, like, oh, I can't believe you're not playing, effect XYZ. That's, you've got to play that in a chaos deck. It's just a matter of what you think is chaotic, what you think your opponents will think is chaotic, and then you just build it based on your personal preference. So at this point, I'm not seeing anything else that I think would be super great. We actually get down to the banned cards, the ones that are not even legal in Commander. So all right, so we've got a couple of options here. Let's go ahead and add those in. So the way to do this, how do I do this here? Let's just add these in one by one. So I will be right back after I finish adding these in. So let's take a quick break, and I'll be right back. Alright, so we are back here, and I've added those 10 cards in. And taking a look at some of these cards, I realized some of them might be better than others. So taking a look at this Fate Spinner, for example, they can use that to skip their combat phase. So if we're trying to mess with combat, they can actually get around our chaos. So maybe Fate Spinner is bad because it allows opponents to have a way to get around what we're trying to do chaotically. On top of that, the other one that I thought was pretty interesting, well, actually, no, I think the other one, I was thinking of the Hall of Gemstone, but it's just a different type of effect. Hall of Gemstone itself, it just makes it harder to cast things, and so that kind of goes into its own category. It's a category of, effects that make it harder to do stuff. Sire of Insanity is another great example. Even Time Sifter could technically count because now you're making it so you don't know if you're going to get a turn. You don't know if someone else is going to get a turn, so it makes it a lot harder to interact. There's a lot of effects that are similar to that, and so because of that, I tend to think of those effects being specifically good for shutting down opponents and making it harder for them to do stuff. The other types of effects that do the same thing are cards like Rule of Law, where you're making it so that your opponents can only cast one spell per turn. So only casting one spell per turn, the reason that's helpful is now, if you've got multiple things on the board that they want to get rid of, Rule of Law on the battlefield could be a way that they can't really deal with what you've got. So Rule of Law is kind of cool in that aspect where you get the Rule of Law down and now they really have a hard time dealing with everything that's on your board. So let's see how many cards like this we can find. We've got to find certainly cards that have the same wording. That's definitely going to be part of it. But there are certainly other cards that are worded similarly as well. So let me see here. The other card that I'm thinking of is the one that mentions non-artifact. And we'll say here spell as well because I can't remember the name of it, but it did mention both of those cards. Here it is, Ether Swarm Canonist. So let me go to that one and I'll find the wording here. Each player who has cast. It's probably going to be the way to find that one. So let's go back here to the previous page. Alright. So now what we can do is we can put that in just like that. So we can find, if we're trying to find specific effects, there we go. Mine obviously is a card we can't play, but we will be able to add in the other 4. And so having these 4 on the battlefield will make it very tough for our opponents to do a whole lot. So I feel like that's going to be pretty helpful for us to use. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to go minimize this and go ahead and add those in. So Rule of Law was the first one. We might not have a lot of room for draw, but that's okay. I feel like in a way the card draw being not in this deck, that's okay as well. Rule of Law. And you know what? I've just realized this one technically counts more like ramp, I think. Rule of Law, we've got the Eidolon of Rhetoric. Eidolon of Rhetoric is pretty cool here as well. We'll go ahead and add that one in also. We've got Arcane Laboratory. Arcane Laboratory. I'm not spelling that right, but that's okay. We'll just put Arcane Lab. This should get us what we're looking for. There it is. Arcane Laboratory. And then the fourth one that we mentioned here was the Ether Sworn Canonist. So we can add that one in. And now it does make opponents be able to cast artifacts to get around this, but at the same time, I feel like that's, you know, it's good enough. So we've got 13 cards here. I do want to add in the lands, but something else to remember, we have 2 tutors here. Opponents, if they can use tutors, they will definitely use them to find something that could blow up all of your permanents. So if they're trying to find a Bane of Progress, if they're trying to find an Hour of Revelation, a Cyclonic Rift, those are all things that they could use. So we're going to go ahead and put these 2 tutors, although they're good, we're going to put these 2 tutors here in this. Actually, no, we don't even need to do that. We can technically keep those 2 tutors if we're only finding cards that will shut down opponents' tutoring ability. So Aven Mind Sensor is one that I can think of that would definitely fall into this category. So yeah, shutting down tutors is going to be an important thing for this deck. So we got Aven Mind Sensor. We're going to have, let me see here, Ashiok, Dream Render. That's another one that's going to be pretty good for shutting down opponents' ability to tutor. We'll get and add that one in the deck as well. And then the last one here is Stranglehold. If you want even more effects like that, you can drop 2 of those tutors and add some effects that, you know, make you not able to tutor as well. But I think at this point this is probably okay. So right now we've got a total of 16 cards in this category, 29 in this category. That means we have 13 cards left over. Now we know 8 of those are going to be lands. So yeah, with 8 of those being lands, what lands would I want to add into a deck like this? You know, I'm going to leave that up to you, Unspoken Blood. There's plenty of lands that you can find. I'm sure you know all about what lands you like and which lands you don't like, so I'm going to leave that up to you. I'm just going to add in wastes as kind of the, you know, replacement for lands, because obviously if you're playing 5 colors, you're playing Jodah, you're not going to be including wastes. So I can at least use waste as a way to talk about, you know, I just think you really ought to add in 8 lands. It doesn't matter what those lands are, as long as they're not wastes, obviously. But I want to add those in so that you can, you know, see the importance of those as well. So we're going to go ahead and add these in. And that puts us pretty close to being done here. We are at 24 cards. We've got room for 5 more cards here. And I'm going to go back to something I had opened a little while back. And that is my chaotic list itself. So, like I said, I had a chaotic effect back in the past. And this was it. This is all, you know, it in all its glory. A lot of people upvoted it. Just 7. I'm kidding. There was another one, actually. I don't know what's going on here. Anyways, this might be an older version or a newer version or something along those lines. But I know I still see, like, every now and then I get upvotes on that old list. So I'll have to find the right one. But anyways, here's one of the lists that I've got. And there's a lot of effects in here that can lead to a more chaotic game. Dream Halls is certainly one card that can do that, but it does speed up your opponent's effect, so that's one of the reasons why I didn't go for that. Forced Fruition, it really put on a different feeling to your opponents where suddenly they can't cast a bunch of things every turn, otherwise they're just going to lose the game from drawing too many cards. There were, you know, obviously cards like Mind Unbound, which allowed you to draw cards as well, and there were a lot of stacks effects in the deck, which is not something I had planned for, but it was certainly part of it. Planar Chaos is another type of chaotic effect I think would be great to add into your list. Psychic Battle, there's a couple of cards here that we do see. Some of these are specific to the commander, which is Zedru, but some of them are just generally good. Smoke, again, another type of stacks effect. So there are a lot of cards in here that, you know, if I were going to rebuild this deck, I wouldn't probably include these. Like War's Toll, it really didn't impact the game all that much. As much as it might look like it would, it just didn't. So let me see if there's anything else in here that I think would be great to add in. You know, Storm Cauldron, it definitely has the effect of shutting down your opponents and making it harder for them to plan out what they want to do. But it also slows down your ability to add more cards to the battlefield to keep, you know, doing more stacks effects. And Ward of Bones here is kind of in a similar situation where depending on what you've got, it might shut down opponents, but it might not. So that's something to keep in mind here. Besides that, I'm not really seeing any other effects. Ooh, actually, this Djinn of Infinite Deceit tends to work out pretty well in making opponents not as happy to play down their creatures. What else do we have here? We've got the Perplexing Chimera. We had that one in the list itself. All right, so that's pretty much it in terms of cards from my list that I think would be pretty cool to add in, because most of the other ones that are different, we found them through our search of looking for things at extra upkeeps. And the fact that so many things care about upkeeps, Paradox Haze will actually be pretty good there as well. So we're going to go and add this one, Planar Chaos, and the Djinn of Infinite Deceits. We'll go and add those 3 cards in as well. So let's go and add those. Djinn of Infinite. I'm just going to write that because I'm sure it'll only come up as one. Djinn of Infinite Deceits is not bad. We'll go and add that one in here. The other card that I think would be kind of cool is Planar Chaos. Planar Chaos, adding that one in as well. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but I've got a much higher screen resolution now. I know a lot of people were really interested in seeing me do that over the course of my channel. Finally got a new monitor thanks to patrons like Unspokenblood and like all the others that are out there. So big thank you to all of you. It's really a huge help to me. So now we've got room for some card draw. Not a whole lot, just 2 cards here. If there are other cards that you want to add in, like let's say you want to drop the Sire of Insanity or something along those lines, you can. We've got here 4 cards as well that I was thinking like it's a maybe as to whether or not I want to keep them in the deck. I think right now we can pretty easily say that those are reasonable to drop. So from here we can add in some spot move, or rather some card draw. So let me start off with the ones that I really like a lot personally. And then if you have other ones that you want to play instead, then feel free to go for that. So Mystic Remora, Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is kind of double duty here in that your opponents, they're also limited by how many cards they can play thanks to the Rhystic Study. I also like Insight. A lot of people play green cards nowadays, so Insight is a great thing that you can use. We've got to find the actual card Insight, though, and that might mean we have to go down here to the bottom. All right, so Insight is the card we're looking for. That's the one that, whenever an opponent's cast green spells, you draw cards. Insight. Another one I like is Compost. This one's actually one of the best ones that I've seen for drawing cards. I think this one is fantastic, personally. Thanks to Jodah, there's also another one that I think would be pretty cool here. It's Magic Mirror. So let me see if this one's actually pretty good, because I know I have this in my Braids deck. If you're going to be cheating mana costs, then might as well play something like this. It gives you no maximum hand size, and then you get to draw multiple cards as you go throughout the game. This one is kind of in a similar boat as the Mind Unbound. So it's kind of cool. It allows you to keep drawing more and more and more cards as the game goes on. It does rely on you having Jodah Archmage out there, which, at the same time, Jodah can really be a high-profile target. So maybe we'll go for more spot removal, or rather more card draw that's a little bit more on the reasonable side. Phyrexian Arena is another one that I really enjoy adding into my decks. We'll go ahead and put that one here. I want to make sure that I'm keeping track of how many cards I can actually add in by putting this in the right stack. That's going to be pretty important. So we are 1 card away. If there's one other card that I think would be good for us to add in, whether it's Chaos, whether it's card draw, there's certainly an argument to be made for card draw, but there's one card I think whenever I play 5-color, I've got the opportunity to play this, I always add it in, and that is Maelstrom Nexus. Getting an enchantment down that gives your stuff Cascade makes it pretty good, makes everything pretty useful where you can start cascading into things very, very easily. You will be able to cascade into Slaughter Pact every now and then, which it's probably pretty bad. But the fact that you can cascade, I think, is going to be pretty nice. So those are the changes that I would make. Certainly a lot of changes in this video. But I think that comes down to, obviously there is a lot in this deck that's really good, but you don't want to be playing just random stuff. You want to be playing chaotic stuff. And I think there's a subtle difference between those two. One that I think it's important to keep track of, but I think there's something there to keep in mind. So thank you so much for joining me for this deck. Thank you for supporting me, Unspoken Blood, and to all my patrons, thank you so much. If you're looking to be a patron as well, Magical Hacker is my name on Patreon, so patreon.com/magicalhacker is where you can find me. Plenty of perks that you can do if you want me to play your deck on in a video, if you want me to do a deck doctor, if you want me to build you a deck tech video, there's all those types of things. I also do extra bonus things every now and then. So thanks so much for joining me for this episode. I had a lot of fun, and I hope you did too. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Stay awesome.